about 3 years, and everyone I've written letters to I've met personally from different parts of the world, except for one person, and we had crossed paths online through a website called Couchsurfing, and we couldn't meet up in Spain, this is where we were, but I'd asked her if she wanted to be my pen pal. I thought that might be fun, and she thought that was a good idea. So fast forward 3 years, I'm back in Canada, and I hadn't gotten around to writing this specific letter, and my dad came in the room, and he said, "You've got mail." So I finished what I was doing, and I decided to go for a walk and open this package, because I wanted to rid myself from distractions or really absorb the moment. And I read this letter, and it was really inspiring that someone would take the initiative to reach out to someone who they'd never met. And fast forward 3 years, this girl, Layla, and I had exchanged about 4 letters to each other. And just a couple months ago, I got a message on Facebook where we would talk occasionally on Facebook. And she said, "Jeff, do you fancy a trip to Nepal?" And my first thought was I was flattered that someone would invite me halfway around the world. And my second thought was, Nepal? I don't even know where Nepal is. I'm definitely not going there. And winter had just set in. We had our first snowfall, and I really do like the winter. It allows me to slow down in life. So I asked her anyway what her thoughts were and what her visions were, and she said she wanted to hike in the Himalayas, and she wanted to help volunteer at some communities. So I entertained the idea, and the more I started talking with her, the more it started to feel real. And I started envisioning myself in Nepal, in Asia, which I'd never been before. And I thought to myself, I'm 27, I'm still young, I have time freedom with my job. It almost seemed like a no-brainer at that point. So before you know it, I was on the phone with my mom, who's a travel agent, and I'm giving her the last few digits of my credit card number. And I love those moments where I start trembling to give that last number, and it's like you're about to push the send button, or you're on the fence, you're at the crossroads. And eventually I'm waiting in silence, I'm hearing some keyboard clicks, and I hear my mom say, "Jeff, you're going to Nepal." So I close my eyes, and when I open them, I'm standing 2,000 meters up in the mountains in a village, and I'm standing beside my pen pal, and we're pinching each other, and we keep saying, "Is this real? Are you real?" And we're saying, "We're in Asia." We must have said that so many times. And so we decided to volunteer through a company called Workaway, which helps families with extra work in exchange to let you sleep there, and they'll feed you, even if it's the same meal 3 times a day, called dalbat, if anyone knows what dalbat is, which is white rice and this lentil soup. And they would even eat it with their hands, which was interesting. And I wasn't the most clean traveling, so they provided us utensils. And at this Workaway, we helped milk the buffalo, and we did little other tasks because it was the off season. They didn't have a lot of work for us. So on day 2, I got asked to help in the garden, and I got asked to help with some vegetables, and I was excited. I was going to be in the garden, digging up vegetables, and I end up at this table cutting these purple onions, and this is where the real story starts. And I noticed that it's a big feast being prepared. We're all outside, there's about 30 people, and this one guy's stirring this big witch's bowl with a massive stick, and it's all curry and potatoes. And I find out that they're not really celebrating something, it's a death ceremony, actually. They had just lost a member of their community, this 22-year-old girl. She had blood cancer and she had passed away. And it was 13 days after. And it was interesting in this culture, people didn't really seem that sad. They were actually quite relaxed and happy, and they were excited. I mean, they were about to eat this big meal that was different than dalbat. And it was just interesting compared to our culture, where we don't really talk about death too often, except on momondays sometimes. But anyway, I had an encounter with this little 12-year-old boy, and he came up to me and he was really curious, and he started talking to me. And he spoke really good English. He spoke better English than all the adults. And later on the day, he started playing my guitar, and I will grab it actually. And he grew fondly to the guitar, and he was learning quite rapidly, and he didn't get discouraged. I've never seen someone learn the guitar so quickly. And I almost wanted to leave my guitar there, but I brought this guitar with me through a lot of places, so I put that thought behind me for a bit, and we went for a walk. I'd invited him on a hike, and we built a fire with a group of us, and we were singing and dancing around the fire. And I noticed the boy went walking off on his own, and I found out that it was actually his sister who had passed away. And I felt pulled to go follow him. And when I walked over, he was sitting down staring at the mountains, and I decided to go sit beside him. And I didn't really know what to say. I could see some tension in his face, and being the older, wiser one, you might say, and traveler, I felt obligated to say something, but we just sat in silence for a couple minutes, and sometimes that's okay. And I just asked him, I said, "What are you thinking about?" And he said, "My dreams and my goals." And I thought it was such a great answer, because I was sitting looking at the mountains earlier that day, thinking about my visions, and I think it's a great spot to be able to see so far and wide. It really makes you feel like your potential is unlimited. So if you can find spaces like that, it's really important. So fast forward a week where we leave the village, and we end up hiking another mountain about 4,000 meters, and then down 4,000 meters in a week. That's a whole other story. But we wanted to go back to this village and bring some gifts. Even though that they didn't need them, they lived a really simplistic life, it just felt like a nice thing to do for the young kids. And I felt obligated to get this kid a guitar. I was in Nepal, everything's quite cheap there, and it just felt like something I needed to do, even though the man we were living with said it's not necessary in their culture, but if I really wanted to. So we hiked back up the mountain, and stupid us went during the day when all the kids were in school. So we had this big plan of showering them with gifts, but we ended up leaving it with their family, and we left, and a week later I was back in Canada, and gotta love Facebook sometimes, where I get these videos, and I hear and see kids screaming and joy and laughter and happiness, and it just filled me with so much love and fulfillment, and a feeling that will stay with me probably the rest of my life. And like I said, I didn't need to do that, but it was a nice thing to do, a little thing. And I get a video of this kid playing guitar, and he's progressing already, and I'm sure that guitar is going to change a life like it's changed mine. So the last thing I'll say is, every time I go traveling, I really like to bring travel home with me. Whether it's in the form of journaling, I really like to write in my journal when I'm traveling, or I'll get other people to write in their journal, or in my journal. Or I'll take a lot of videos and capture people's emotions and hear their voices. But this time was a little different, where I was able to actually leave a piece of me in Nepal, a physical piece and a spiritual piece, if you want to say. And I was able to leave joy in this community that I can watch grow and hopefully return someday. And the last thing was, you don't need to travel that far to leave a piece of you, right? You can leave a piece of you in strangers you come across with something so simple, and the Nepalese people did this so well. Is whenever I'm traveling, I like to try and smile as often as I can at people and just send good vibes. And I noticed in all the places I've been to, everyone in Nepal, every time I smiled at them, they would smile back at me. Not 80% of the time, every single time I knew I was going to get a smile back. And that's something so simple that I think everyone is capable of doing on an everyday basis. So thank you. Namaste.